Hey guys, me and Luca here in Uvita in Costa Rica on this beautiful beach, and we just thought we'd take a moment to introduce ourselves to the fellowship crew and talk about how Syntropic agroforestry has brought Syntropy into our personal lives.
Yeah.
Isn't that right, brother?
Our tickets.
Our tickets to the beach just flew down. Yeah, so basically, let's chop this pineapple up because it's in the view of the beach.
All right. Ready?
Oh, yeah, baby. Yeah, me personally, I've been on the Syntropic journey for about 2 years now. By the way, you can plant that. Most of you probably know that. Yeah, I've been on the Syntropic journey for about 2 years. Somebody a close friend of mine led me to Byron's page, and I just got really intrigued and started. Oh well, wash it off. Started creating my own Syntropic agroforestry system. Only listening to what Byron taught, what seemed to me to make sense, which of course was not support species. Well, I did put Titonia and Barna grass in, but I didn't want to put eucs inside my system or acacia. Like, what the hell, man? I wanted fruit, right?
Yeah.
So, 2 years down the track, I've learned my lesson, and just before coming to Costa Rica, I of course put in some acacias and eucs because, they're such an important, integral part of the Syntropy in your food forest.
Yeah.
You need that sticky material, woody material, sorry.
Woody. Yeah, I think I was stuck on permaculture, and it seemed like there was a bit of a barrier. Well, not so much a barrier, but there was less focus on support species, so they were really spread out. I did have a lot of Mexican sunflower everywhere, but they were definitely not as dense as they are now. After doing the 6-week course with Byron, it's like, oh, okay, I can go every 50 centimeters, I can try something. And then in between that, try something else. I think if you plant your options, plant your shade, it's all management from there, I think, and just trying to observe and then interact. But really giving yourself time to observe is very key, I feel.
Yeah. It's a game. It's a symbiotic relationship between you and your forest.
Yeah.
Which is actually what we really want to talk about is the intense relationship that we've found with our agroforestry systems and how it relates back to us. Just to keep it real simple, sometimes you need heavy pruning in your life, Just whack a limb off.
Yeah. Lose
some baggage. Cold turkey. But sometimes a part of your system might need extra nursing. Sometimes it's hard to see which one it requires. But only through actually putting into action do you see the results and do you learn from your system, because you'll get feedback real quick.
I like that.
As you do in your own relationships, whatever, you prune someone out and you'll feel the effects pretty soon.
Yeah.
What experiences have you ever had
man.
and how the system relates back to you yourself?
Ooh. I think it's that circular system in regards to energy. So the energy that I put into my system, I feel that come back in so many different ways as well, And I think my family feel it too, Whereas if I was just to be passive, put a lot of energy into entertainment, watching a lot of series over and over, eating pizza over and over or whatever, I don't feel like you kind of get that energy back. I feel like you use energy, like your body uses a lot of energy to break that shit down. Your mind is using energy to pay attention to this stuff, and then you don't get that back.
And that's such a good point, because actual hard science is now proving the fact that you're actually in communication with your forest, I mean, our food forests back home are actually missing us. They get acquainted and used to your visits. They recognize on a cellular level your footsteps in the forest.
Yeah.
And there's such an intense relationship that you form with your food forest. And that's, that's just such a beautiful thing to bring. You were mentioning earlier on how, your backyard, you live in the city, but yet you have this beautiful friggin' jungle, that it's like a place for play, right?
Oh, absolutely. Curiosity and play and excitement. I walk out there and I know that, even like I've been away from the system and my family for 3 weeks now. I miss them all so much. I didn't think I'd miss the garden so much because I'd be immersed in other gardens and systems. But no, like I really miss her. Sending my family, hey, can you please send me photos of the garden? Can you please tell me what's going on? I need to see the new growth. I need to see how it's happening. Yeah.
And just to know that that's that your forest feels the same way, eh? You know?
Definitely reciprocal. I think once we can start peeling away those layers of the matrix, and start letting our intuition come through and give our time, observe those feelings and let that come out. Go out there and put your hand on a tree and feel the energy. And I mean, I used to just regard it as woo-woo, and I have so much more peace and understanding now that I don't use that language for it anymore. I just let myself be a part of that energy cycle. I'm involving myself in it. The longer I can sit in the system, the more energy I put into it, the more I feel like my family does the same thing. So instead of preaching from a platform saying, this is what you got to do, it's just about getting in there, being amongst it, feeling it, and then that becomes a source of inspiration, and that becomes the new norm, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I find that my Syntropic garden has also shown me a way to slow down, you know?
Ooh.
And to realize that everything's in balance. And, you know, the kikuya grass might be sneaking in, but as a whole, the system's not quite ready for an intervention, you know? And you might feel inclined to just pull that out, but let it all do its thing. It's in a community, you know? And when the time is right, and you'll feel it, you'll know when, you do a larger intervention, preferably when the moon is waning, and just go in there and do a large intervention, and you'll see your whole forest react.
I love that. I remember when I first started, it was probably about 2019. I just learned about Google culture beds, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. So I built I built 3 of those, and I put all these annuals in there. And I was obsessed with going out there every morning and checking the caterpillars and trying to flick them off. And I was like, they're eating my stuff. This is annoying. So I was after that short-term gain. I really wanted those cucumbers that no one in my family would eat besides me. And there's only so many cucumbers you can eat. But I was still obsessed with what kind of sprays could I use, or what kind of this could I use. I wasn't of that mindset, but I didn't know what to do. So I just kind of let it do its thing. And I wanted them to invite the predatory insects, and I wanted that to be kind of ran off track there.
What is it they say? You don't have a insect problem. You have a predator deficiency.
Yeah. So allowing the grandfather wasp to tell the young wasp, hey, go get food from over there. And then I think that's why it's important to plant perennials too. You really create that consistency for the cycle.
Yeah.
Those are so good.
And just to know that every plant in your system plays such an important role, you know? I mean, I've said it before, but the comfrey is just as important as the avocado tree. They live together. And when you realize that within your syntropic system, there's pockets of, you know, your system is an entire microclimate, but within there's little climates of their own. God, I sure hope that guy stops bloody chainsawing in a minute, because I hope you guys can hear us. a bloody tropical beach and all you hear is chainsaws.
Yeah. Paid like $40 to get in here.
I hope he's doing a big intervention. What an amazing pineapple though. Huh?
Yeah, it's really good.
Wow. But on that note of you know, the avocado tree and the comfrey, in the end we do all know that the avocado is the king of that particular microclimate.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You know, and that's well, we've just come off this permaculture course here, 2-week deep dive into permaculture, and we had a topic on non-violent communication, which we'll get into in a bit, but it was interesting. The discussion grew around hierarchy, and you know, there's certain people who believe in hierarchy, there's certain people who don't. It's a bit of a touchy subject, but leadership, there are certainly natural leaders, and all I can do is look back at the jungle and see how she does it. And there's definite leaders in the jungle, and yeah, it's an interesting subject, isn't it? Hierarchy.
Yeah. I think it really matters on the context, and it matters what you put before the word hierarchy. So I guess typically hierarchy may be seen as a lot more valuable than, you know what I mean?
What do you mean, seen as more valuable?
Yeah, we talked about the avocado tree being the high-valued species, the one that we're kind of after.
Yeah.
The comfrey supports it to get to that place.
Yeah, and
like
so does the Mexican sunflower.
Kind of like in our bodies. Something like 2 or 3% of our, or 5% of our bodies' weight consists of microbacteria in our gut. Where do we draw the line at us being the high-value species and us being ruled, or not ruled, but
that's,
you know,
really interesting.
supported by these little microbiomes. So,
well, there's in fact a lot of scientific evidence claiming that they are in charge of our emotions, which in turn they're in charge of our thoughts. So they're in charge of our friggin' reality, right?
yeah. So where do we draw the line?
All the more reason to eat nutrient-rich food straight from the good soil.
Yeah. So I think it's how you lead, or it's how hierarchies are formed, and it's how they play, how they interact with, I don't know, sometimes I feel like with hierarchies we put the leaders on this pedestal and everyone below that is like secondary or tertiary to the importance of it, but maybe I think that's kind of like an egotistical view as opposed to an ecological view. And the more perspectives we can own and use, I feel like.
Well, that's right, and I think our egos, our human egos, get in the way of that hierarchy.
Yeah.
And whereas the trees have no ego. Well, I've never sensed that they do. You know, they just are. And they just are the kings of the forest, or they just are the minions who protect the king and allow the nutrients to be there.
Yeah.
And don't forget that when the king dies, he becomes a very important part of the forest.
Yeah, it goes back into the cycle.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I feel like our human language gets in the way when we describe these systems in these trees. Oh, these trees competing for nutrients, or they're competing for this and they're competing for that. I like to believe that under the soil, they're all working together. They're all plugged into this macro and microorganism, and they're working together to for life, I guess. For life, we're just trying to create life and be efficient and be as collective as possible. Really about diversity. They all help one another. But I think because we have this scarcity mindset, especially in the West, that can tend to take over. And then we start using that language to dissect what we see around us. So I guess that's where really where observing, the first rule of the permaculture principles comes in, observe and interact. If we can observe from a non-biased standpoint and have no, I don't know the word right now.
Don't try to interfere.
Yeah.
Just observe.
Just observe.
And that's when you can really learn from nature. Observe and interact. Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful notion to just, oh my gosh, look at those birds. Huh.
Oh, wow.
There's some big parrots flying overhead. Yeah, it really is quite intense to just go into a forest and just be. And just let her teach you. Just observe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you can zoom in on little micros and zoom out on bigger things.
Yeah. I like that.
Any of you guys ever had Inga beans? Oh my God. I've only ever eaten one in New Zealand.
Oh yeah?
I'm very new to all this. Well, it's the truth, 2 years ago, I knew nothing about any of these fruits. I knew a bit about orcharding and, I was always growing veggies, but when I realized that you can grow subtropicals in Northland, man, I was very quickly hooked. Of course, I got heaps of Inga beans in the ground, but something else.
It's so soft and fluffy and light. And huge seed in there.
Of course, we're taking these puppies back home. Spread the DNA.
Yeah, it's cool. Oh, shit, I just threw it away.
Spread the DNA. That's a little bit here. What else about how the system is teaching us better ways of life?
I think it's a value community.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think sometimes, especially, in my context anyway, me personally, sometimes a lot of the time I don't put effort into understanding my neighbors or making that connection with them. I feel like I've already got a friendship group established, so that's kind of where I put that energy. As I feel like...
Whereas now there's going to be food forests popping up all over your neighborhood.
All over the neighborhood. So trying to incorporate our energy into our immediate community and sharing the abundance in that system. And I guess we only have 200-300 square meters of backyard. So I kind of imagine if I encourage my neighbors to plant these systems and get involved in this kind of lifestyle, then my garden grows too, or the garden, the forest kind of grows
Absolutely.
too. So from a bird's eye point of view, it's just propagating itself, And I think that's what happens with these systems. They just want to propagate. It wants to spread.
Byron said a beautiful thing that nowadays it's a big topic, about your footprint. But he says, how about we try to be the largest handprint, through our actions create a bigger handprint. And
Yeah.
I think that's really beautiful. And just to touch on that community, beautiful. It's just so interesting how the food forest has helped me realize, I have a lot of friends, but I could do so much more with those connections. And that's kind of what it's all teaching me as well, is that it's so important to use that skill that you've got, whatever, and bringing people together or whatever it may be. Everybody's got their own talents. To use those talents within your community, And I feel that I personally could do much better there. And,
Oh, that's wonderful. I like that.
and I will do,
Yeah.
because the forest has shown me that,
I think touching on what you said before about Byron's comment, he was saying that when we try and worry so much about our footprint and trying to minimize it, there's only so close you can get to having no footprint or a very minimal footprint. Only so close you can get to zero. Whereas with our handprint, it's infinite. You can inspire infinitely. You know, depending on your context or your capabilities, there's no end to it. So if we really focus on how we can inspire and how we can inspire ourselves, I think, and how we can grow ourselves, let ourselves.
And again, within that community, I feel kind of our community is being destroyed through these industrialized food systems, you know. We're no longer in touch with our food, and we're no longer in touch with our neighbor because we're all working in our own separate units within that system. And the system's, it's a failure, let's face it, right? So I think through creating a forest and creating an abundance of food for you and your family and your neighbors, because you will, it unites you in your community.
Yeah, you become a pioneer in your community, you know.
Yeah,
and I think
separates you from what I'm trying to say is it separates you from the system failure, which, whether it's been done intentionally or unintentionally, it's the way it is, and we need to unite again.
Yeah.
And through realizing that and breaking away at what is wrong, heavy pruning, we're creating a better system, because we've forgotten this way of life, right? And our kids need to be reminded.
For sure. I think we spend so long, we've been so accustomed to outsourcing our responsibility for food or responsibility for a lot of things, actually. A lot of things. You know, like our garbage, we just put it in a plastic bin and it disappears. Or, you know, we use perfect drinking water to flush our waste. Or, you know, we're just so used to these systems that don't really give back. They just take and they use a lot of energy. They don't really give much back. Whereas if we start practicing compost toilets, at least that goes back into the system, so the energy that we expand goes back into growing food. Or
keep the poop in the loop.
Keep the poop in the loop.
It's a big one though, man, you know?
Yeah, and once we can get over that barrier, then it's just growing infinitely, you know? We become a source of our own inspiration, and then we start, this is getting real messy.
Whoa. So what do you reckon, bro? What else do we want to touch on here?
I think the importance of decommodifying our entertainment source. Maybe our entertainment doesn't have to come from a box. A bunch of people talking on it. So
unless they're talking about Syntropic.
Unless you're in the school community. No, I think there's like context for that. So I think that's the beautiful thing about the school community is when you press that school button, you're trying to download this information. You're trying to practice and share this information. And I think that's that level of intentionality where we get to practice being intentional as opposed to living a passive life. I think that's super important. And that's, you know, imagine growing up with that instead of just being thrown in front of a TV, you know?
Well, and wouldn't you say that, you know, your system is such a beautiful way, working in it and observing it is such a beautiful form of meditation, and even especially the chop and drop is such a beautiful form of meditation.
It's so fun, you know?
Too.
Yeah, honestly, growing a tree that's like 4 meters tall in a year and chopping it down, that's fun. And then watching it regrow that year, like, what the fuck? Chop it down again. It's
and to know that through doing that you're enhancing its life and enhancing the rest of your system, you know. Oh,
it's
man.
way easier than getting on your knees, worrying about weeds. And it's like, you know, if you had a permaculture garden and you walked away for 6 months, you now have a permaculture weed forest, which in itself is pretty alright, but that's not your goal, potentially.
It's actually a good place to start your new Syntropic system.
Weedscaping, get amongst it. I volunteer at this community garden down the road, and the very first day I was there, I was tasked with doing the weeds, and I was like, in my head, oh, we must have like a cold compost or a lazy compost system to put these in. They're like, no, we're going to put them in plastic bags and then put them in the bin. And I was like, oh, gee, minutes.
Yeah, talk about
That's
keeping
a
the
wild
poop out
fucking
of the
idea.
loop.
Poop out of the loop. Whereas, man. Anyway, it's very hard to just try and... I was trying to do the slash and stash with them. I'd cut them off at the base and then just try and hide it under some of the very thin layer of mulch they had. So I was trying to be sneaky, but that's just sometimes the mentality, and we're trying to break that down. And
I notice, whether it's just for tidying up sake or what, but over here on the beach, they're really nicely organizing their organic matter around the base of these trees. I don't know if it's intentional, but I certainly notice it. Anyway, what do you reckon, Luke? 25 minutes of us talking nonsense might be enough for these people.
No, I think we can edit some of this shit out.
What else do you want to touch on then?
Oh man, when I very first started this food forest a couple of years ago, watching my daughter get out there and get excited about everything, man. We'd be using the existing trees to grow some annuals under there. I don't really grow too many annuals now, but only because I don't practice irrigation, so sometimes they don't like that. But watching her face light up, it's like, oh my god, a blueberry! Oh my god, a tomato! And that level of excitement just inspired me so much to just push more, get her involved out there as much as I can. And what that looked like for me was having interactive pathways, not just a straight pathway with this and that. Having big rocks in there and having big logs in there that just a bit like, oh, that's not really my aesthetic. Just really making our aesthetic, not making, but changing our aesthetic in the garden and making it interactive. Getting my little one to stand on top of a log so she can see, start high-fiving some of the sunflowers, like just shit like that. Just watching that is just so fantastic.
So cool, man. And that's right, like especially in your urban setting, you've only got a small space to work with. Let's make it beautiful and interactive and playful.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a freaking hectare, well, let's go straight lines that are really manageable.
Yeah.
I have the same. I have out further in the back of, I guess you'd call it a zone 3. I've got rows of Syntropics, whereas close to my house, it's a really playful system. It's not in a straight line. It's hard to manage. It's very unmanageable. But yeah, it's enjoyable like that. It's more playful.
Yeah, that experiment level. You get to experiment. And don't plant trees too close together. And you're like, well, let's see what happens when I do. So I've got this star apple that's maybe about nearly 2 meters tall. And we have a huge mango tree. It's like 35 years old. And the fruit bats just love dropping mango seeds everywhere. So what's happened is there's now a mango sapling, maybe about a foot high, that's just they're touching basically. And just watching them work together. Like they're going to occupy different levels eventually. Wow. But at the moment, that's how they're going to live.
That's how nature does it. I mean, we just come back from this jungle walk, and the lower strata of the jungle is so incredibly full of life, eh? There's so much going on there, but only some will survive. But they're all playing such an important role.
Yeah.
For the jungle itself and the nutrition of the soil, and shading out so that other seedlings can take place. And it's so cool to see that you're noticing that happening in your small environment, that the animals are coming in and doing their thing and planting new trees for you.
Yeah, I think that was the cool thing. I started planting big logs just vertically because I wanted the birds to be able to jump around on places and, I don't know, just other animals occupy the space. And I noticed wherever I put a big log, branch, vertical branch, now there's some mulberry trees growing underneath there. So I'm like, how can I help these mulberry trees? Let's get some beans. I'll put some beans under there and throw some tomatoes in there and, just see what happens. Like nature will let it happen. I think if we work on the seed bank under the soil and just let it pop up, let it do its own thing. I think in Syntropics, something like 95% of it comes down to management. So I think this just gives us practice in experimental managing and how we can use that. Obviously I don't have much space, so I'm just trying to use it as best I can. Whereas if you had a lot of land, you probably experiment differently. But yeah, just really occupying these different strata levels, different light requirements, and just playing with that.
And isn't it
Pretty
fun
fun.
how quick the change come? I mean, your daughter's 3, right?
Coming up, yeah.
You know, and she's going to have this memory of how this forest was. You know, you have these photographic images in your head.
Yeah.
And I noticed that with my daughter. You know, about a year into starting my first system, I came out and I noticed my daughter playing around in there, and I said, "What are you doing, hon?" And she stood up and she's like, "You know what, Dad?" She said, "When you said you were going to make a jungle in our backyard, I thought you were crazy, but it's actually turning into a jungle."
Oh.
And that's in a year, you know, but it is,
Yeah.
you know, and the growth is so incredible, and the speed is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've recently involved quails into our system, and my little one loves going out there. Daddy, let's go check on Snowdrop. And we'll go out there, and she was like, "Oh my God, an egg!" She'll pick the eggs up, and then we'll take them inside, and then we'll cook them. They're so cute, cooking quail eggs. You've got this little tiny saucepan. Yeah, no, she loves it. It's, yeah. I think as long the longer we can keep our children out in the system, the more energy they give into the system. I think you're just gonna trigger those memories that they're just gonna hang on to for a lifetime. I think sometimes when I relate these stories to some people, they're like, "Oh, I remember my grandma teaching me this, or being in the garden with my dad, and this and that." So hearing those stories really amplifies that motivation. Be like, "Yeah."
And just to relate that back to the energy of the forest recognizing your footstep and stuff. You know, your daughter, your forest knows your girl.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And feeds off her happy energy. You know.
Yeah.
It really does. Like classical music.
Yeah.
What was it we heard that tomatoes do really good on 2-pack, huh? But you know, I have our trampoline situated right smack in the middle of the food forest because, man, I am convinced. I know that the laughter and joy of the kids has a very positive impact on the forest.
Yeah.
You know, and on me when I'm working in the forest.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Yeah. No, that's fun. Doing this last bit.
No, I'm good, brother. Let's go and wash off the sticky juice in the ocean, and we'll catch you guys live and
On the 6th?
on the 6th, or you know, on the many calls after that.
Yeah.
And look forward to getting to know you guys on a more personal level, and interacting more in that live space.
So cool.
It's so cool to have a community of like-minded people, you know. That's what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, look at me and Luke here. We met online during the Pioneer Boot Camp, and you know, picked him up at the airport of Costa Rica the other 2 weeks ago, and it just clicked.
2 weeks on.
You know. So let's get all our like-minded energies together in a big pot of Syntropy, and
Let's grow.
stir it up.